Hello everybody, this is Joseph P. Farrell with another video blog. I had some comments from a lot of you that you seem to like these video blog formats. I can appreciate that because it's easier to listen to blogs than to read them while you're driving to work and so forth. So I'm going to continue doing kind of mixed up video blogs and written blogs on the website. And today I am doing a vlog, starting a series, really, that I'm calling Gold Bearer Bonds Audits Speculations and Really Wild Speculations, Part 1. Because yesterday, during the news and views from the Nefarium, I was talking about how the German Parliament now has jumped on the bandwagon and is requesting an audit of Germany's gold reserves from the Bundesbank. All right? And many of you know that I've been following this story and the bearer bond story. And what I want to do in this little mini-series of video blogs is to try to connect some dots between the two scenarios because I do think that they are connected. But in this first video blog in the series, what I want to talk about is what I'm calling the white dragon scenario. In fact, I put on a Blue Dragons t-shirt just for the occasion today because I wanted to talk about the scenario that's been out there that has been popularized to a great extent by Ben Fulford, to a lesser extent by David Wilcock, who's done a lot of additional research into the matter. And I want to make clear that I'm not attacking these men. I am simply questioning aspects of the scenario that they have put out there. In fact, I'm not the first to do so. Henrik Palmgren of Red Eyes Creations recently had Cliff High on his show, and Cliff High said many of the same things I've been thinking, and I'm going to repeat here, and said them with reference to this scenario. The scenario that they've created, basically, is a kind of an adjustment to the scenario that I've been suggesting for a couple of years now, that in the wake of this financial crisis that suddenly hit the world in the wake of the derivatives collapse and the housing market collapse, that the financial crisis seems to have all the signatures, to me, of factional infighting going on within the world's major financial elites. All right, we're going to get back to that idea. Fulford and Wilcock have constructed a version of this interpretation in which a so-called good elite, the White Dragon Society, whatever you wish to call it, in other words, a society, a secret society, essentially, of Oriental gangs, of Oriental criminal societies, secret societies like the Triads, the Japanese Yakuza, and so on, are supposedly behind a move to take the world away from fiat-driven currencies monopolized by privately held central banks and to step in and more or less save the day. Now, what my problem is and has always been with their scenario, and it's exactly the same problem that Cliff High had and has. My problem is that you have essentially one elite replacing another. And to me, the idea that this elite would be a so-called good elite combating the so-called bad elite in London and New York is a bit of wishful thinking, I think. Um, the idea that criminal secret societies like the Yakuza, the Triads in China, and so on, would be thinking in terms of the benefit of humanity is, to me, a little far-fetched. You do have, with the scenario, the idea of infaction and fighting amongst the elites, and that aspect of their scenario I do agree with, but I don't agree with the religious overtone that has been attached to this scenario of a kind of a messianic expectation that all is going to be well, someone is going to step in and pull our fat out of the fire. You see this religious meme being planted very carefully and deliberately, in my opinion, in a lot of the other alternative media communities. The UFO community with its idea of disclosure, with its idea of an imminent contact with aliens and so on and so forth. I think we're looking at yet another version of this. Now, what got me started in all of this, as you know, was the bearer bonds. And the fact that the bearer bonds were gold backed, they were denominated in amounts that were never officially issued. Now, I think, again, we need to be cognizant of the fact that in all likelihood, a market for such bonds could not exist if there were not an underlying reality. I've commented on this at great length in the members area in a series of interviews that just recently were done with my web developer, Daniel Degree. And I want to kind of summarize one of the points that I made there. That is that a market could not exist for these counterfeit bonds unless there were some underlying reality behind them. I suspect that what this means is that you had fake bonds being created deliberately by the very same elites in precisely amounts that were never officially issued, that were privately circulated in the financial community to people that had placed a lot of their gold reserves in the hands of the Western central banks. And as a result of this circulation of bonds that were very, very rarely issued in amounts that officially did not exist, means that what they were doing was in effect officially counterfeiting stuff. So that if the people that they were issuing these bonds to didn't play ball, they could then turn around and say, well, these bonds were counterfeit. They never existed. There was no such bond that was ever minted. This is, in fact, a tactic that was pursued by the Japanese government in the 1960s and 70s, precisely in connection to all of that gold that was recovered by the Imperial Japanese government during World War II and Operation Golden Lily. So in other words, the second thing I think we need to bear in mind here as we're looking at the scenario that I'm going to outline in the next couple of video blogs is we need to look at the fact that the bearer bond scandal broke approximately 2 to 3 years ago. There were other stories long before that, but they never really captured the attention of the world media, both for the amount of bonds that were being counterfeited, the type of denominations, extremely high denomination bonds, and the fact that they were all allegedly gold-backed and from the Federal Reserve from the 1930s. This is the key thread that seems to be running throughout all of these bearer bond stories. Now, I've also pointed out another fact that has recently come to light, and that is you've noticed that Venezuela, Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, repatriated his gold reserves. Germany now has joined the fray, as I noted last night in the news and views from the Nefarium. Germany has also joined the fray and is requesting for an official audit and is making noises that it wants to pull all of its gold reserves out of the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank in New York. And we're going to see in an upcoming blog just how substantial Germany's gold reserves are. The same thing now, as we're also going to discover in future video blogs, India has done the same thing, and Switzerland has jumped on the bandwagon. Now, why do I find this so significant? Let's go back to Lord Blackheath in Great Britain, who gave us yet another version of the White Dragon scenario by claiming that there was a good elite in possession of vast financial reserves that it was willing to give gratis to Great Britain to make infrastructure improvements, so on and so forth, and to lift unemployment in that country. All right. Lord Blackheath in the House of Lords, and you can check Hansard's for this, Lord Blackheath in the House of Lords stood up and said that there was a vastly larger amount of gold apparently in existence than was officially admitted. All right. So we have yet a third component I want you to pay attention to here, and that is the number, the amount of gold in circulation or allegedly in existence. The numbers do not jive. So I'm suspecting that what we have here are the major countries have looked at these bearer bond scandals and concluded that, hey, There is a massively huge fraud and deception going on with respect to the amount of gold in existence. And the fraud all appears to be connected to those banks in the London, New York nexus of central banks, the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, and so on and so forth. Principally the Federal Reserve, as the bearer bond scandal connotes. So let's look at, in these coming video blogs, let's look at this constellation of facts. I think that, and my thesis here is, in these upcoming video blogs, is that the calls for these countries to repatriate their gold reserves, or at least have audits of their gold reserves done by their respective central banks, is in response to the bearer bond scandal and its implications. They've seen the handwriting on the wall and they're reacting, and we'll talk more about that in the next section of video blogs. This is Joseph P. Farrell, so stay tuned, folks, and I'll see you on the flip side.